What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Double FU, the fantasy football universe. My name is Jeremy Shulman at FF_Rebel. I am joined by Jesse Moeller at JMoeller05. Today, we are talking about free agent wide receivers, the top 10 at the position, and where they might land. Jesse, how you feeling today?
I'm feeling glorious. It is a little past midnight, Saturday morning, aka late night. Just the usual thing I do around here this time. Got the WFU above me, so we're rolling with that. It's a good time to be alive. What can I say?
Awesome. Yeah. And but for contrast, it is 9:13 in the morning over here in Amsterdam, bro. It's too much sun for me. I just woke up. It's a Saturday morning. I'm here drinking my coffee, trying to get into it, ready to go. So we're pumped up, ready to talk about free agent wide receivers, which at least will be more exciting than free agent quarterbacks, right?
Hey, I mean, it ain't too much after those first 2 or 3 quarterbacks. You're like, all right, Jacoby Brissett, let's go, baby. It's not so great. It's not so great. What can you say?
Ooh, Ryan Tannehill, where will he land? Right?
Exactly, right. I'm sure everybody's so pumped. Like, okay, any sides with? I don't care.
Exactly. And speaking of not caring, I mean, let's jump right into it. Noah Brown comes in at number 10, formerly of the Houston Texans. Listen, I really liked what Noah Brown was able to do last season. Part of that was obviously CJ Stroud. He's played with now Dak Prescott and CJ Stroud. So wherever he lands, if he lands with a good quarterback, we know he can produce. If you look at the value there and what we're expecting for him to command in the open market, he's 3 years for about 18, maybe 19 million. I think he's pretty young too, somewhere in the 27-year-old range. Does that sound about right to you? Let's see, 28 years old. Okay, so he's still got a couple of viable years left. 3-year contract makes a ton of sense. So, where do you think Noah Brown will land? Where do you hope he will land? And can he once again be like a fringe fantasy viable starter?
I mean, if he's going to play with like a Burrow or, go to Mahomes, if he's going to a quarterback, sure, like one of the higher end quarterbacks. But if he's going to sign him, speaking of Tannehill, if he goes to Tennessee or something like that, I'm going to have negative interest in Brown. This just is what it is. Interestingly, like he has the weirdest career. I'm looking at his stats right now. Back-to-back seasons of 550 yards, basically almost identical. Before that, it was like under 200 his entire career. So the last 2 years, he's done something. And, he only played 10 games last year, and he split up the best stats of his career. He was a deep threat, like 17 yards per reception. He did some nice things, and that's the Stroud effect, I guess we could call it. But I just don't know where he's gonna go because he's kind of that in between guy, right? He's not good enough to be a starting like number 2 wide receiver for your team. He can kind of come in and spell. He can do a little bit of things. He can stretch the field deep, but like for fantasy wise, it's just so hard for him, right? So it's kind of stacked against him. But I mean, if he's getting money like that, that'll at least draw some interest from somebody.
Real quick, he had a 2-game stretch, and obviously we know Tank Dell was out by this point, and I believe Nico Collins was in and out of the lineup. He was the featured guy in Houston in week 9 against Tampa, so no true slouches on defense over there. 28.8 PPR fantasy points, 6 for 153 yards and a touchdown. He followed that up against Cincinnati. Again, not a terrible pass defense, with a 7 for 172 effort. So we know this guy can put up numbers. Is he going to be able to do it consistently? I don't know. But again, it does depend where he lands. If he goes to Cincy, that would be interesting. Tyler Boyd replacement, although inconsistent. If he goes somewhere like maybe the New York Jets, who definitely need to add someone to complement Garrett Wilson, whether they go the expensive route or the cheap route, we'll see. Or like you mentioned, even the Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, I think that could be pretty exciting for him, but we're not going to get too hot and bothered in free agency over Noah Brown, I don't think.
No, he very much lived the Gabe Davis role. He had 3 top 10 finishes of like 3 weeks. And then outside of that, his highest finish was wide receiver 48. I'm looking at that center now. It is like super boom when it hit. And when it didn't hit, you're like, all right, cool, I can't start this guy. But that's the CJ Stroud effect. It's a nice thing to have for those guys.
At number 9 coming in is DJ Chark. At number 8 coming in is Kendrick Bourne. I don't want to talk about DJ Chark. I mean, where he's a wide receiver in the league. I don't think he's going to be doing anything, and I don't think he's going to be putting up the fantasy points that Kendrick Bourne is. But between Chark and Bourne, and we'll throw Curtis Samuel in here as well. Between those 3, who do you expect to be the most fantasy relevant, and what are you thinking in terms of landing spots for whoever you want to talk about here?
Oh, it's Curtis Samuel by far. He's by far the guy not coming off of a severe knee injury like Bourne is. So like Burns dealing with that, And DJ Chark, he's a deep threat who had one good season the second year back in 2019. Outside of that, it's just really been injuries. Not a lot going on for him, but he has speed and he's a big body guy. So NFL teams love that. So he can play the MVS role if you ever need him to do that, which is just go run those wind sprints for me, go do that, help me take care of that. Curtis Samuel, he's been a very a viable player for a team and is a slot guy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he gets some like underneath carries and like receptions around line of scrimmage. He could do some good things for you. So for a team, I actually think he's by far the best option moving forward. I just don't know. I know Kendrick Bourne has some nice efficiency numbers. He always has. He's just never been able to put together for a full career. So, you know, with Samuel, at least you've seen it the last few years in Washington. Even with John Dotson, Terry McLaurin, he's still able to stand out and been, I think his best season was like top 26 or something like that, if I remember correctly. But
yeah,
he's viable. Yeah, so he's been viable, at least for fantasy. So if we're going to do that, it's the slot guy. They get the easy targets, and it's just easy to get those targets, right? So it's just naturally those guys fit better for fantasy. So Curtis Samuel, but I would prefer him immensely over the other guys, and it's really not even close for me.
How many years do you think Curtis Samuel's been playing?
Ooh, it's quite a long time. I think this would be his 5th year. Is this right?
8th. This will
Eight?
be his
No way. 8
year.
Oh my
He's
God,
played 7 years in the league at this point, and he certainly wasn't when he came into the league. But he's got that veteran experience about him and that moxie to get open. And if you just put him and his speed in the slot, like you said, and like the Commanders kind of started doing, if they had anybody, a halfway decent quarterback throwing him the ball 7 billion times over the course of 2023 season, then he might have put up more production. But of course, he was buried behind Terry McLaurin. And I guess the ghost of Jahan Dotson and for some reason De'Ami Brown. So, he had his boom games, but you mentioned that that was back in 2020 for the Carolina Panthers. He finished as the PPR wide receiver 25. And it was his lowest touchdown production of his career, only 3 touchdowns. So interesting there from DJ Chark. If you feed him and give him the volume, he has the opportunity. So, this isn't, I hate to keep putting guys there, but this is another interesting guy. If he went to Kansas City, right? If we put him with a top tier quarterback, especially one that, that's a team where Travis Kelce is declining. He can certainly run the seam, but he's not what he used to be years ago, right? He can still get open, he can still command targets, but if you have kind of a speedster running crossers and Kelce running the seam or the intermediate routes there, I mean, that would be really interesting. And then just draft another guy to put him over the top. You got Rashee Rice on your screens, you're good to go. Sign Saquon Barkley, boom.
That's a national championship right there, aka Super Bowl again. So yeah, let's do it. I'm on board.
That offense is rolling again. So Curtis Samuel will be interesting to see where he lands. But yeah, he's going to be a short to intermediate area guy. He's not used too often on screens, I didn't notice. But we'll see. We'll see, what some of these new head coaches are going to do and offensive coordinators and how they're going to utilize their guys. The next guy here, Tyler Boyd, is interesting. Tyler Boyd is a professional wide receiver, completely buried behind Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, but he's shown flashes when he's been able to be the guy when those other guys are out with injuries. So, we're pretty confident, especially with the T. Higgins tag. Whether he gets traded, we'll see. But with the T. Higgins tag, it's likely Tyler Boyd is gone. Where do you think he lands, and where's the best spot for him to go?
So this is actually an interesting one with Boyd. He's kind of been this a same guy his entire career. I mean, obviously there's been situations back in the late 2018, 2017 where he was getting a lot of targets and he was involved in the offense, but that was just because if you look at the wide receiver core, it was abysmal. There was nobody else in there. They had AJ Green. He went out for the year. Tyler Boyd had 148 targets or something ridiculous, right? This is before T. Higgins. This is before Jamar Chase. So he's a guy who can step up if you need him. But realistically, he's just a dependable slot guy. He's not someone that really can do a lot of things offensively. You get what you needed to get done. You need 10 yards. You need him to run a curl route. He can happily do that for you. So any team that needs a slot wide receiver, I think they'd be happy with Tyler Boyd. Obviously that contract's not too steep. It's 3 years, $26 million. That's not bad in wide receiver money, right? And if you space out for 3 years, you get by. So depends on the team that you're looking for. Obviously, a few teams that could use him, it would be very interesting. It's just about if you need him to run block. I think that's more of the bigger question, if you're going to keep him on the field in those situations or not. So for me, it's really just you find a team that needs a slot. I think we talk about this all the time. I think Dallas is a fun fit. He could play that, and you can let CD kind of just go all over around the field. You let Tyler Boyd run some underneath stuff as well, and it kind of works. So I think that's a really open, fun place for him. But overall, fantasy-wise, it's just really hard to start Tyler Boyd. because you don't know when it's going to happen. Maybe they have a good matchup that works out, but I've tried starting him in the past and it is almost always backfired on me. And then I bench him and then he puts up 20 points per game. So it's like I just can't figure him out personally. So for fantasy wise, I think he's much more of the better, like good NFL wide receiver. Fantasy wide receiver, like I'm probably not gonna have much interest unless he goes to one of these places, because like Jacksonville, Christian Kirk still come off the injury. We don't know if he's coming back. Like you can bring him back there. You find a place with a capable quarterback, and then Tyler Boyd can give you some weeks every now and then.
Yeah. And, he's 29 years old. I just have a feeling that he's going to probably end up signing for less money on a team that's not contending for whatever reason, because we have 5 guys in front of him who are going to be available. And we have a incredible wide receiver crop. At least, the top 4 to 6 guys are going to be starting over Tyler Boyd wherever they land. So somewhere like Tennessee, would be interesting. I'd like him to go somewhere where he can be the number 1 target hog, right? Traylon Burks has proven he's not that. He can certainly be a capable NFL wide receiver if he develops and, command 80, 90 targets. But, someone like Tyler Boyd who can soak that up, even in New England, right? I don't hate that. Fit, like you talked about Kendrick Bourne is coming off of injury. Demario Douglas is just about all they have there outside of the re-signing of Hunter Henry. Yay! Woohoo! Great job, guys. I kind of feel like his fit is more in line with a lower tier team. He's just going to collect his paycheck, do his work. But if he does that and goes to a wide open spot, he can potentially be fantasy viable. But this isn't a guy that you're looking to acquire at all. You just see what happens.
Yeah.
Odell Beckham. I mean,
that's the best description right there. The
ghost of Odell Beckham. I mean, he can still run a route. He can still get open sometimes. He can still catch a football. But do we care?
I mean, so the weird thing about how he was like his usage towards the end of the year, they were literally like fading him out of the system at the end of the season. Like that's the thing with Odell Beckham. He's nowhere close to anything of that name cachet that he carries. So like I would rather a team just honestly they don't pay him this coming because he got $15 million last year and he was a complete just bust for them, right? For the Ravens. So even if you're paying him $11 million, I think you could just go get it. Like I'd rather have my team sign Tyler Boyd than Odell Beckham Jr. Honestly, I think that's where he's at. He can't stay healthy. Like it's just like he's good mentor for like young guys in the league, and you want to do that. So if you want a culture fit, like sure you can bring that in, but you're paying a lot of money for a guy that's going to be a culture fit, and I just don't think he's going to be that viable for you because he had a perfect role last year in Baltimore, and they were just like, you know what, like it just isn't working. And he played like 40% of the snaps in the playoffs. It's just like, all right, obviously if you're only playing 40% of the snaps. Speaking of another guy in that same situation, Bateman, that guy can't stay on the field healthy either too. So maybe that's something to do with Baltimore and their issues with keeping guys healthy. But at this point, I've loved Odell Beckham when he was younger. Just at this point in his career, like I'd rather have him just go be like the wide receiver 5 on a team where he just helps guys build up and get better. So like go to a good spot and he helps the young guys develop. So like you could send him to New York and he could help like Romo Duze if he signs there, right? And then you slowly build him up that way. But for fantasy and like playing stuff, like if I was on running a team, I would not be that interested in bringing him in honestly. Like would you, if you were running a team, is he be a guy you would target at all, even bring into a team?
The only way I would do it is if I was maybe in LA and just trying to run it back on the Rams. He that's a spot where he can slot in pretty easily as the wide receiver 4, run some routes, just be a positive force in the room, which is funny. We're talking about Odell Beckham being a positive force in the wide receiver room and in the locker room. But at this stage in his career, it seems like he realizes that, there's not much else going on for him. And that's plenty of time spent talking about him. Here's another guy I don't want to talk about too much, but I think we have to. Gabe Davis, number 4. Leaving Buffalo this year, which, good riddance, because he was just so inconsistent in that system with Josh Allen throwing him the ball. But he's certainly an interesting talent. It will be intriguing to see the team that signs him and how they decide to use him. There's potential here. So what do you think about Gabe Davis and where he might land?
Yeah, I think he plays that role of a guy who could stretch the field, run deep routes for you, and do some things where you need some, because like he's a good physical athlete. It's just he's still not complete as a wide receiver, and like we were hoping for it to happen. It was the ideal setup. It doesn't get any better than you're playing alongside Stephon Diggs. There is no other competition the last couple of games, right? You're dealing with like Khalil Shakir, these guys. It's literally wide open for you. You just should never do it. And obviously he had those monster playoff games. We were super excited, but could never string it together, like you say. The consistency is always there for him, and that's kind of the issue with these guys that are like below the really good wide receivers is just lack of consistency. You don't do it over time and time again, you know. And this is the thing with Gabe Davis. Like, he can make big plays for you. You have no idea when they're going to happen. Literally, like, he could go 5 weeks without a big play and then on a 50-yard pass for you. But overall, I think he's a good guy to bring into a team that needs someone to stretch the field deep. You pair him with somebody with an arm. So, like, we just talked about this with Calvin Ridley moving on Jacksonville. I think Jacksonville's a really fun fit for him because they need someone to do that. They literally had the ghost of like Calvin Ridley, who was better than the stats say, but it was still Calvin Ridley. Christian Kirk got hurt, and then it was like, what are we, like, who else is on that roster, right, running routes for you? It was Evan Ingram getting on target. So
Zay.
I think, yeah, it's Zay, and like Zay is Zay at this point. He's kind of not the Zay Flowers level Zay. He's definitely lower than that. So I think a place like that was where he can stretch the field with a competent quarterback. You want to send him to Arizona with Kyler. I think that could be fun. You could have a lot of things then, because the Arizona roster is pretty thin at wide receiver too. So if ideally I want him to go with a team that needs a deep threat, stretch the field, and he can actually make some plays for you. So any one of those situations like that, I think there will be some fantasy viability for you, but realistically, it's best ball only for Gabe Davis.
Yeah. I got 2 fantasy fits that I love for Gabe Davis. The first one, and I'm going to make a promise right now that I probably can't keep. It's the last time I'll mention Kansas City, but the Kansas City Chiefs, putting Gabe Davis with Patrick Mahomes, who's just going to absolutely air it out to him. We know we have the short and intermediate areas of the field covered with Rice and Kelsey. And whoever they decide to bring in as a pass catching back, Gabe Davis can absolutely stretch the field for you. He can be better MVS. He is better MVS. Is he as fast as MVS? Probably not. But keep in mind that this guy's only 24 years old. And he's got the prototypical build. He's 6'2", 225. So Gabe Davis, for all of his weaknesses, like you just mentioned, in route running, he's got the potential, if you can pair him with a quarterback with a good arm and some decent downfield accuracy, he can be fantasy viable. And another one, which is just personally would be exciting for me to see, would be Chicago, right? Chicago's 5th in cap, as you can see right here. So if they're able, they need to sign somebody else. They certainly have DJ Moore. Darnell Mooney is likely not coming back, but Cole Kmet is there as well. And they have Khalil Herbert and Roshan, who are going to, be coming out of the backfield. So if you draft Caleb Williams and he can develop some sort of rapport down the field with Gabe Davis, that again can be interesting. But I also like your Kyler fit. There's lots of really interesting places where Gabe Davis can go. But unfortunately, like you mentioned, it's unlikely that he's going to be consistently fantasy viable on a week-to-week basis. So that's just, at this point, we kind of know who he is. And here's the guy I just mentioned coming in at number 3. I don't know why. I love him. He's on a lot of my fantasy teams and been sitting on the bench for 2 years. But Darnell Mooney, getting away from Chicago is the best thing that he can do for his career. But what's the next career move for him? Where's he going to go? Where's he fit best?
That's actually interesting because, like, we had a couple years ago where he saw 140 targets. We were actually pretty high for him in his year 2 coming out. And this was basically, it was a slow build. It started out 98 targets. Then he jumped to 140 and we're like, ooh, there might be something here. And then it just fell off the face of the earth in 2022. And we're like, okay, maybe Darnell Mooney is not who we thought that guy was. And then in 2023 happens and it gets even worse. And you're like, okay, I don't know. It's like it felt like he lost the ability to be who he was previously because his hands were just betraying him nonstop. And you see some of the stuff with Darnell Mooney and you're like, dude, you were a capable NFL wide receiver. What is going on here? So yeah, I think he's an interesting fit for a team that wants to get, like we talk about Gabe Davis, you just go cheaper and you get Darnell Mooney into a good wide receiver room. I think he can fit a lot there. And I think that would be a really fun situation for him. Obviously, teams with money in situations like that. The Colts could use him. I think that would be a fine fit. With Cincinnati losing Boyd would be fun. I mean, the Raiders don't really need a wide receiver, but I think adding him to that room and you take a little bit off of those 2 guys because Mooney's more like, I know I love, why am I blanking on his name?
Jacoby.
Yeah, I love Jacoby, but he's not that athletic anymore. So, like, you pair Mooney, you bring him in there, that helps out. And we talk about Atlanta being kind of a dumpster fire with the lack of talent around there in the quarterback. But if they ever get a quarterback, if they got Kirk Cousins, then you bring in Darnell Mooney, and then you have 3 competent pass catchers in that, and then and then you're cooking with gas with that. So overall, I think there's a lot of fun spots where Darnell Mooney could be good for that NFL team. Fantasy wise, that's a whole other level, just because, like we've seen the last 2 years, it's been a rough go for him. So you're kind of hoping he gets back to the 2021 form. Is there any places in particular that you're looking for that you think would be a nice fit for Mooney?
Well, selfishly, I want him in New England. I just love the player. But that would also be decent for his fantasy value, right? Like we
Mhm.
don't know who the heck's going to be. It's not decent if it's if it's like Mac Jones or Bailey Zappi throwing him the football. But
No.
we're assuming someone else is going to come in there, whether they draft him or bring him in free agency. So I like that fit for fantasy and for reality. But again, I think he's a good NFL wide receiver, like you said, fantasy wise. Um, not quite. Oh baby,
Here we
Jesse.
go. Here
This
we
is
go.
my boy. I'm doubling down this season. I don't care. I don't even care. I mean, and you were the first one to share this with me about a week ago. Matt Harmon's reception perception came out. Calvin Ridley is winning at all levels and all routes. He's fully green. Ian Hartitz had a video where he just stitched together all of the Jacksonville Jaguars dropping
Gosh.
passes or barely getting 2 feet down, or Trevor Lawrence just sailing the ball over their heads. Calvin Ridley was like, he missed a good 6 touchdowns last season that were like by the skin of his teeth, and he caught 8, right? So
Yeah.
listen, this guy is a monster. I know he's getting up there in age. I think he'll get through the whole season still being 29, but I think he turns 30 on like December or something. I looked this
Yeah.
up the other day. So he's getting up there, but he's still has the potential to command targets in an NFL offense. So what are you thinking about Ridley for fantasy, for reality? Where's he go?
So I would urge people, if they like paid for that prescription, to read the article, because it's not like, I know it's all green and we really like it, but Harmon's like, there needs to be context added to this. It's good. He's not elite though. Like, and that's the thing. And I'm like, yeah, he's still a good NFL wide receiver. I don't think anyone's disputing that. If people are not saying he's good, then I would question like what you're watching, right? And I know he's your boy, so I'm not gonna like harsh on him too hard, but he needs to be a guy that can move around the field. We saw when they just line him up outside of X, like that was a disaster for Jacksonville, because he can't win the same way. Like, he's getting older, he's getting 30, so he has to win differently. So if you can move him around, you kind of mix and match, you get him off the line of scrimmage, you let him play that flanker role, or you put him in the slot. It's a lot easier for him to win in that role, because it's, not as tough. The competition is not as tough. The coverage is not like it's backed off a little more, and Calvin Ridley could win a lot easier. So I think he could be a very viable guy and fit in like pretty much any wide receiver room, as long as they have the pieces around him, right? If you're fully dependent on Calvin Ridley, you don't have much else. We talk about New England, like they need to add somebody else. So like, if you bring Ridley, you better go pay up for another wide receiver or do something else, right? Because then you got Pop Douglas in the slot, you kind of move them around, add another guy in there, and then we have 3 capable wide receivers. And then it's like, okay, we don't have to worry about Hunter freaking Henry anymore, right? But it's just, there's like a fun, like, I think pairing him in Tennessee, if they like giving Will Levis another guy, right, to go with DeAndre Hopkins. I know they're both older, I get it, but like, you need to see if it works for Will Levis. So he's a fun one. And obviously Jacksonville's letting him go. I think they would have re-signed him, but that price tag, like, you got to pay a 2nd-round pick to bring him back. Like, they're just like, you know what? Like, it's just not worth it. And I totally get it, because you can just go get a guy who's 8-9 years younger than him in the draft, and you save money on top of it too. So it's like, I get that for sure. But I think there's quite a few places you could fit. And like, I know we talk about the Lions and the issues with Jameson Williams, how the head coach came out and said, I don't know, he's got to compete to be a starting guy. So it's like they're looking for another guy. So if they don't trust Jameson Williams, you bring in Ridley, you pair him in there too, right? So personally, like, I'll be happy with any fit he goes. It's more about the quarterback and who the quarterback is. If he has a capable quarterback, I'll have interest in him, because we do this all the time. We overreact. A bad season, people are just like, oh, I'm done. I'm like, okay, the value's there. Like, let's go get Calvin Ridley. So that's kind of where I'm at with him.
I love Calvin Ridley for fantasy purposes. In reality, I do not want my Patriots to spend money on a damn near 30-year-old wide receiver at this point. We need to rebuild properly from the ground up. So while I agree he would fit there, please, like, Ridley, Boyd, just, move on. Go find, I'd much prefer, and I don't even love the player that much, but I much prefer Gabe Davis, just because he's 24 years old and maybe he can still develop into something than these guys who we already know what they are, and they don't have too much time left. For me, and you mentioned this team a little bit earlier, but this just feels like a Jerry Jones special. Bring in Calvin Ridley. You have Cooks in the slot. Like you said, you can move Ridley around. You're already moving Lamb around. You just have a bunch of movable chess pieces and really try and take this offense to the next level. I think the problem is that, Dallas is really never going to get to the next level. I don't know if it's Dak. I don't know if it's McCarthy or the scheme, but the only reason that they went off last season is because that schedule was so light on them in the back end. That offensive line is declining. So who knows what it's going to be. But for my money, I want to see Calvin Ridley in Dallas. I think that would just be fireworks and a lot of fun.
I would like that too. I think he's a better player than Brandon Cooks is right now. So
Yeah,
basically, you're upgrading for Brandon Cooks, and you're basically like making that room a lot better. And like if they can afford it, I don't know, their money's a little tight right now. So he's gonna cost like he's not gonna be cheap. Like I don't think he's gonna come in like I'm not sure what Aaron had listed. I need to double check what it says right there. Yeah,
oh,
$68 million for 4 years. So it's a pretty petty. He's definitely not cheap, right? So teams got to pay up to get him, but I would like that. I didn't know why my Dak shares would very much like that. You give him another good wide receiver, and it's like, all right, let's
exactly.
go. Another top 5
Exactly.
finish for Dak. So yeah, I'm all aboard that.
But yeah, 4 years. I don't know if a 29-year-old receiver is commanding a 4-year deal. We'll see.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's going to cost a lot in the open market. He's probably the best wide receiver, but the most coveted wide receiver, and probably because he's a bit younger than Calvin Ridley. Was he 27 years old, I think? And a
Yeah.
burner is Marquise Brown. He struggled last year, like really surprisingly. The whole fantasy community was super high on him. But he really struggled last year. I mean, we know Kyler was out for the majority of the season, but even when Kyler came back, he just didn't look like the same guy. Marquise Brown is 26 years old, so that works in his favor as well. And he's going to command some money out in the open market. Does he stay with his college roommate, Kyler? Is he going back? Or is he going to Minnesota, as Aaron puts it here, or somewhere else? What are you thinking about Hollywood?
Yeah, I'm fine. It seems like they want to move on from him. I don't know why that is. Interestingly enough, it's not the same regime that paid the first round pick for him. So it's a new GM, and they're changing how they're going about that. And maybe it just doesn't fit the style they want to play with Kyler. So I don't mind them moving on from him. He's gonna have plenty of suitors. He's a very capable NFL wide receiver. It's some guy that I've always loved just because people hated on him because he was small. But I was like, this dude's fast, and he could actually do a lot for an NFL offense. He can move around. He wins at all these levels. He does a lot of things for you. So he's kind of like a slot plus player, but he can also move around. Like he's not just strictly just a slot guy, right? So he can stretch the field with vertical plays. He can do stuff underneath. He's a pretty good wide receiver. I wouldn't say he's elite wide receiver, but he's in that I'd say top 20, top 30 NFL wide receiver range. Like he's a guy you want in your NFL wide receiver room. So you ideally want him as like a number 2 to pair with an elite like wide receiver. You do that, and then you let him cook because he's not fighting some competition and all these things. So pairing him with like an elite and alpha wide receiver, and you go from there. Like then we're talking about that. I know we talked about CeeDee Lamb. I think that would be another fun one. Like you do this, and he's a younger version. Like he's not as old as Ridley, so you do that. Go there. But any team that needs like a competent number 2 guy, like Hollywood is that guy they should be targeting. It just comes out in the money situation if teams have it, right? Like I know the Bears are going to draft, like say they will draft from the Doomsday, but maybe they want to get offensive linemen right at the 9. They go do that. And then they decide, you know what, we'll just go get Hollywood and we do it that way. I think that's a fun way to do it. There's a lot of teams that you could use him for. I think the Colts would be a good fit for him. You could go with that because I know we like Josh Downs. I'm not 100% sold on Josh Downs just yet. So you do that, you go there. The Bengals, the Bengals have a lot of money. They were replacing Tyler Boyd. You bring in that offense just gets, I think that would be actually a whole lot of fun to go that route because then you're bringing an explosive player instead of Tyler Boyd. And like that's dynamite. I don't know how you stop those 3 wide receivers. So that would be like the dream scenario. I don't think it's likely, obviously, but for fantasy, like that's what I'm hoping for personally.
Yeah, I got a fit that makes too much sense, and I'm actually happy I just thought of it. I want to see Hollywood Brown and Hollywood Powder Blue. Bring them to the Chargers. Pair him with Justin Herbert. We got Keenan Allen running the intermediate area of the field. Who knows who else is going to be there catching footballs other than Josh Palmer. Yeah, they're probably going to draft somebody as well, but they need to revamp that room. And I love the idea of Marquise Brown eventually taking over number 1 duties from Keenan Allen over the next year or 2 here, whenever he decides to hang it up. So, you want somebody who, like you said, I forget who was with Gabe Davis. You want someone who can fire the ball deep downfield. We know that the Chargers and Jim Harbaugh are likely to emphasize the running game. But at the same time, if you have a guy like this, who's just an absolute burner on the outside, who can also run some routes for you, it would be an interesting fit there. So that's what I like. Bring Hollywood to Hollywood and let's get it going for fantasy.
Or, just Carolina, go pay money. I don't care. Get some capable NFL wide receivers. Go get Hollywood.
Carolina, no.
Let's do it. Let's do it. Yes, give Bryce some chance. Give him a chance, man.
Oh, yikes. Well, look, on that note, let's end this one. Let's put Hollywood to Carolina. Let's put Hollywood out of his misery here. And we'll say that you can find this article by Aaron St. Denis or all of our top 10 free agent by position articles on the Fantasy Football What the heck is the name of our website? FantasyFootballUniverse.com.
There it is, baby. There it is. We're cooking.
FU. Check it out. You can also check out our breakdowns on podcasts, all on the website. We're on X or Twitter. We're on TikTok as well. So make sure check us out. Subscribe for daily content, free agency, rookie profiles. We've got over 100, the draft, etc. We're just pumping out content, and we're pumped to be doing shows like this and everything and breaking it down. So for myself, for Jesse, we're going to say goodbye for now. Tune in for the next one. Take it easy, guys.